Hello, hello. I don't know if I've used this before with you guys, but here I am. Just wanted such an important chapter, and we're towards the end and break, so I wanted to finish it off with one kind of my lectures. So here we go. Let's do this. Let's get through it. I think when we talk about modern history, this is one of the most important chapters and time periods because it sets us up a lot for where we are today. Okay. All right. So this is 1980, 1992, and it's basically it's Reagan and George Bush. Um, yeah, and conservatism. Cool. All right, let's do it. Let's see if I remember how to do this. Here we go. Okay. So where we left off before was Jimmy Carter. Ended with kind of a rough ending for Jimmy Carter. If you remember, the economy wasn't doing well. The Malaise speech he gave, and one of the biggest public frustrations were the hostages, right, from Iran. So that's where he is going into this election, and Ronald Reagan is going to run here. Ronald Reagan and Vice President Bush. Look at that slogan. Can you see it? Again. Ever heard it? You should. Um, so basically, it is true, he was an actor from California. And I mean, wasn't like a great actor, B Squad. Um, but it slowly he became a little more popular and had a good face, had a good kind of casual way of dealing with people. That eventually they kind of picked up on him to run for governor of California. And he's going to make a political switch here. Um, Early on, he's like a big fan of FDR and more of his liberal ideas. And now he's going to kind of switch. Some people would say it was opportunism. It is what it is, and now he's famous for conservatism. Um, so basically, against big government. We'll talk more about that in a minute. But we've talked about the new right already because it was slowly rising. And really, the new right was rising in reaction to anybody? The liberal, kind of all the liberal movement and the rights movement and the gay rights and all, feminism and the anti-Vietnam War, just kind of even that hippie culture and youth culture, counterculture, all that in the civil rights movement too. The new right was basically coming against that and rising because of that, because that really defined in the 60s and the 70s. And then you move into 1980 and beyond, and conservatives is really going to grab hold of America. Okay, we'll talk more about the new right in a little bit. Move my face. There we go. So look at that. It's a pretty easy win there. If you look at Carter, there's Georgia. Probably one of the last times Georgia went Democratic. Now, is this a rise of conservatism? Yes, but is it also kind of a blunder of Jimmy Carter's time in office? And that is true as well. So what would have happened if somebody else stronger would have run? Who knows? But it's important because a sitting president has lost an election, and that does not happen very often. Hoover, I believe, was the last one. Okay, so the Reagan Revolution. There's two kind of big things that he's going to deal with. We'll talk about each one of them, but like foreign affairs is going to dominate really kind of the second presidency, and the first half is going to be more fiscal, like economic. Oh, I was also going to say at this point, Reagan is the oldest president to be elected. He was 69. And then your boy Trump, maybe not ya boy, I just felt like saying ya boy. Um, Trump, however, now has won over the elected uh, president. However, because Reagan ran 2 terms, he is older than Trump. Okay, here we go. So first day in office is inauguration day. Boom, the hostages are released, and that is definitely a testament to how frustrated they were with Jimmy Carter. But that's still a big deal. Reagan is kind of where he gets his roots here is in California. And if you think California, and he was president, I think, of the Screen Actors Guild. And so anyway, you think California, you think of money and real estate and how it's expensive to live out there, right? Proposition 13 was basically a movement to not basically lower real estate taxes because people in California were getting taxed like crazy, and they still are. My brother lives out there, and it's like one of the most expensive places to live. Anyway, they won this, and it really set in motion across the country how taxes were a big frustration for a lot of the conservative-minded people. When I say conservative, that means economically conservative. So anyway, this is a big change from here on out about taxes and being linked with the Republican Party. Okay, all right. Reaganomics. This is that fancy term that gets, I guess not that fancy, that gets associated with Reagan all the time. Okay, he is all about smaller government. That's his little famous quote right there. Government is not the solution to the problem. Government is the problem. Sorry, let me keep up here. Okay. Smaller government, less bureaucracy. Bureaucracy. Ever since the New Deal, there's been so much big government, and LBJ and his big great society and all that kind of stuff. And freer markets, which means same thing, less restrictions on business. And that is still a big Republican idea today, right? Get the government out of the world of business, right? Obviously, there needs to be some regulation, but Republicans would argue that there is too much regulation. And if there's too much regulation, the businesses aren't free to move and create, and then it just stifles the economy. Okay. Now, alongside this, another thing he changes here is the idea of the government giving a lot of handouts, like food stamps, kind of like Medicare and that kind of stuff. He doesn't touch that, but ideas like that, welfare, so that the government should not serve as much of a welfare state like it did in the back of the New Deal. And even they would argue with, like, again, JFK and LBJ, and remember how they were war on poverty? They were dealing with that. He's like, nope, we need to get out of that more. Okay. And then he's going to have supply side economics. Okay, so the biggest thing on supply side economics is reducing taxes. Today, Republican Party still, and that's why I say this chapter is so important, because it really lays the foundation for a lot of the political parties today. Okay, so Republican Party today still agrees that taxes should not, they should need to reduce taxes. I was about to say taxes shouldn't be a thing, but that's not true. Reduce taxes. And what's the idea behind that? Because the negative of reducing taxes is the government, dramatic pause, see if you can come up with the answer. The government doesn't make money there, right? Think about that today. You know, that's where the government makes most of its, not most of it, a lot of its money is from taxes. If you reduce income taxes and real estate taxes and that kind of stuff, then they're not making as much money. But the argument against that is kind of two things. Is one, if people have more money, the government's not taking it, they have more money to spend, which stimulates the economy. The other side is some people are, increases motivation to work because their money's not being taken away. And then you've got more people in the workforce and blah, blah, blah. So those are the big components of Reaganomics. Yeah. Now, how did he get all that stuff passed? Because, there we go. It's not a dictatorship. Sorry, it took me a long time. Okay. And it's a democracy, so you got to get Congress to pass this. Well, he, with his suave personality, is going to convince people from the Democratic side who are frustrated with Carter to come on over to Republican and vote Republican for a lot of these issues. That does not happen a lot today, right? That is a big difficulty today in our system to get a lot of moderates who will kind of swing which way they feel. I was going to ask you, review for the AP exam. What was another word of people back in the day who used to switch and go vote the opposite? Remember mugwumps? I'm sure you said that. Yeah. Okay. Cut taxes. There we go. Okay. Now, Reagan is going to get this nickname of the Teflon president. You know what Teflon is? It's like bulletproof Teflon vests. So in 1981, there was a very, very close assassination attempt. Let's see if I can get my face out of there. Okay. Over here, I don't know if you can see where I'm pointing. And that little crowd is basically where this guy shot from. And it was after like a speech he gave. And there's a crazy video that I would show you, remind me to show you tomorrow, of all this. And it's just, I was gonna say should have hit him, but it was like 10 feet away and he was just a bad shot and missed him. And it actually gave a lot of sympathy towards Reagan and allowed him to, he's known very well liked in history for a couple different reasons, but people would argue that this is one of them. Okay. All right, what is going on here? This is the national debt. There we go. Okay. One thing we're about to talk about that Reagan did is he spent a lot of defense because the Cold War is still going on, and he is going to be hard on the Soviets. However, if you are going big on defense budget and you're not collecting taxes, then this is going to leave you with a big deficit here, right? Big debt. He is credited for adding more debt than all of his predecessors combined. So think New Deal and all this flack that he got. I mean, he is more than everybody else combined. Okay, and really, kind of what you're going to see here is there's a lot of reasons for the increase afterwards. Bush is going to continue that idea, and then 9/11, and then on something else I'm forgetting. Oh, the 2008 recession. So anyway, okay. All right, so speaking of the Cold War, so like I said, he was hard on the Soviets. He came up with the Strategic Defense Initiative, SDI, also known as Star Wars. There we go. Star Wars, and it got that name. That's a, I can't think of the word, making fun of it name. So the Strategic Defense Initiative was basically Reagan saying that we are going to build up our military, our nuclear abilities, and the big thing that we're going to be able to do is if the Soviet Union is going to fire any missiles at us, we are creating new technology that can basically beam like laser beams and attack these missiles mid-air and destroy them. So it's creating this like giant shield around America. Um, and that's where people started to make fun of the idea of, okay, I see where you're going here, Star Wars with the shield. Um, Now it's the bluff here, or the bet here is he's going to spend all this money. Is this going to create another arms race and only increase the Cold War? His bet here is the Soviet Union's not doing well economically as us, and they can afford this, so maybe we can win them with money. Okay. Um, However, things only kind of heat up after this. A passenger jet was, or a passenger airline was shot down over Soviet airspace. Poland. Okay, remember we've got Soviet Union is comprised of Russia, right? And then all of the bloc, right? All of the satellite countries, the Poland, all those ones we talked about. Well, Poland is starting to have this uprising, people maybe trying to overthrow communism, but Poland's government comes in there and stomps it out and crushes it. Poland's government does that. You feel me? Anyway, this eventually leads to the Soviets boycotting the Olympics in 1984, which I always think, sorry, that was in Los Angeles in the United States. And I always think about those poor athletes. Like, what if, this is a random side note here, I like had trained my whole life in my peak years, it's like 1982, maybe that's when I'm like 20 years old to 24, right around this time. And all of a sudden, my country boycotts the Olympics, and I'm like, oh, I have to wait another 4 years, and maybe that I'll be 28 by then. Girlfriend knows my ACLs are gonna tear like crazy. So anyway, so, side note. Okay, where were we? Okay, Reagan's second election versus Walter Mondale. But fun fact here. Oh, where's my picture? Oh no, there it is, bottom right. Fun fact here is this is Geraldine Ferraro, and she is the first female to be on a presidential ticket. Or it's vice presidential ticket, whatever. She's running for vice president with Walter Mondale, and so that's kind of obviously a big deal. Um, yeah, they lose. They lose pretty badly. Um, and Reagan is well liked. The conservative movement is going strong. The Cold War is actually going okay. All right. People like his stance, I guess. Okay, well, after this election, a new leader of the USSR comes in, Gorbachev, Mikhail Gorbachev. And he's probably one of the most famous ones. I mean, you probably heard of Khrushchev. We've talked about him. Brezhnev, probably not. Um, Gorbachev is going to be the one, I don't think he gets enough credit, but that takes the first steps towards uh, lightening the ropes. Nope. Lightening the chains. There it is, of the USSR. So he's going to enact these two policies, glasnost and perestroika. I wish I could hear your Russian accents much better than mine. So glasnost, what that is means openness, and that means kind of more socially openness, free speech, and the ability to criticize, allowing more free speech. No, it's not America, and no, if you think of Putin, and you worry about free speech today, right? But still, it was that idea was being opened. Okay, and then perestroika is more economic. It means economic restructuring. and it is taking a step towards freer markets, which is obviously a step away from communism, and giving small businesses the right to kind of do things on their own. Okay, so that's a big, huge step, and because of that, if you see this bottom left picture, after like 3 or 4 kind of summits between Gorbachev and Reagan, they signed the Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces Treaty, which basically says that they're banning these intermediate range nuclear forces, like in Europe. Like America had nuclear weapons, in Europe pointed at the Soviet Union just in case, and same thing. So that's a huge step, huge, massive steps. We're not done yet. We still got about 5 more years, 4 or 5 more years, but it's a massive step. Okay. All right. This is a big one. Other foreign affairs. But kind of skips around with all these, but I'm putting them all together on this slide because they do all come together. All right. Your boy Israel. There's your boy again. Okay. Israel is still today struggling with Palestinian attacks, right? It's kind of a constant thing. Well, there's a lot of Palestinians hiding out in next door Lebanon. I wish I had a picture for you, but I don't. And Israel has had enough and decides to go attack next door Lebanon, who's housing some of these Palestinians. Well, Lebanon is technically not at war with Israel, kind of neutral here. And so because of that, the UN has to get involved. So they send a United Nations peacekeeping force, which actually involves America as part of that peacekeeping, kind of going against Israel here, right? And unfortunately, there's like a what do you call it? Suicide bomber runs this truck into the military barracks and kills 200 Americans, and so after that, America's kind of out. Um, Side note is why this relates is because of a lot of the Muslim extremists. Remember, Muslim extremists are very against America and the Western world. Have taken a couple different hostages at different points, and so America's trying to deal with that on your back burner. We'll come back to that. Now, different place in the world, Nicaragua. Okay, so basically there is a leftist, kind of liberal okay, leftist group that overtakes Nicaragua. Right? They're called the Sandinistas, and America is against them. The rebels overthrowing, and the reason is because they're leftists, and that means they could lean communist, okay, and dictatorship. And that scares America, and they're especially fearful because Nicaragua is a central part of Central America, if you will, and America is worried that if Nicaragua kind of gets hold of that, then they could spread that to the rest of Central America, and then that's a huge communist force to deal with down there. Okay? Well, Jimmy Carter and Reagan, both are against the Sandinistas. Okay, shoot, there we go. Carter tries diplomacy, doesn't really work, but Reagan decides that he wants to do more. And there's a group fighting against the Sandinistas. I would draw this all up on the board if I could, but they're named the Contras. So you got the Contras, who we kind of support because they're not the Sandinistas. And they're trying to basically overthrow the Sandinistas. Okay? And Reagan keeps asking Congress, let's send help. Let's send military help to the Contras, or let's send financial or arms or anything. Congress says no. Why does Congress say no? Lots of reasons, but think Vietnam, right? Getting involved in another communist civil war, essentially. So this is where controversy. It comes out that there was a little scandal going on here. It's called the Iran Contra affair. Now, how do Iran and Nicaragua relate? They don't, except for this. Reagan, well, I'm sorry, I shouldn't say Reagan. Some people come up with an idea to sell arms to Iran. I would write Iran on the board. Okay? We're going to sell arms there. Iran is fighting Iraq. In the past, we have supported Iraq in their war going on between Iran and Iraq. The reason for that is because Iran has kind of like more extreme Muslim fundamentalists who are against American westernization and democracy and all that kind of stuff. Okay, so you got Iran and Iraq. In public, we are supporting Iraq. We'll get back to that. And however, in this little deal, we are secretly selling arms to Iran. Now, in exchange, we're getting money. They're supposed to also, however, help get some of some of these hostages freed for us. That's kind of part of the deal. Anyway, the money from those arms to Iran, they secretly send them to the Contras in Nicaragua who are fighting the Sandinistas. Okay? So that money goes to the Contras to help them. How shady does this sound? Super, right? Well, it comes out, it becomes public, and Reagan basically throws the card. I didn't know what was going on. If that happened, like I didn't know that was going on. I did not give orders, blah blah blah. Now, no proof ever comes out that he did give orders. However, it does come out that this is a big deal if you don't know this is happening underneath your watch, right? You should know. And then you see that Time magazine right there. Reagan knew everything. That's the officer. He got really famous then. Okay. Now, remember his nickname, the Teflon President? Turns out it does hurt his reputation in the long run. However, there's no big impeachment process or anything like that. Okay. Okay, so coming back to the kind of the new right, a big part of the new right is the religious right. This is the religious component of the new right. Look at this. Okay. And if you think about the religious right, big things they're against: homosexuality, abortion, feminism. Okay, because remember we talked about this before, how feminism can ruin the foundations of the family and that kind of thing. And that can relate to abortion as well. I'm sidetracking for 1 second. I don't know if I talked about this, but the new right in general is also like they had issues with like prayer in school. They wanted prayer in school. Issues with busing. Remember, issues with affirmative action. Okay, I don't think I said that before. Anyway, the religious right though is really just the religious part of it that stem most of the new right. Now, the moral majority kind of gets famous here. This is Jerry Falwell, who is the founder of Liberty University. He just got famous like in this last election. If you know anything about Liberty, it's a super conservative school. There's a girl on my soccer team from high school that went there. There's like girl dorms and boy dorms. Well, that's normal. There's curfews and this was girls couldn't go into boys' dorms and whatever, guys couldn't go into girls' dorms, and there was curfews and you had to be back. It's very conservative, but people go there for a reason. Where are we? So anyway, he started that university, Liberty, and started this kind of big movement. He was a television evangelical, who was all about prayer in school and anti-abortion and all that stuff. And so he called it the moral majority. Remember what I was talking about, the silent majority? Kind of similar idea that we are the the majority here, and we care about morals and abortion and gay rights and all that kind of stuff. Would go against these morals. So anyway, huge moment, huge change here because it's again a reaction to the 60s and the 70s and the hippie culture and the civil rights movement and the gay rights movement and the feminist movement and um, sex, drugs, and rock and roll and all that kind of stuff. Um, Here's my point: is this is still, I would argue, a bedrock of the Republican Party today. Um, and we can go into this more later, but the Republican Party still, you know, it goes for, it uses a lot of this motivation to get not just like the big business, it tries to get even some of the poor people with some of this moral arguments. Okay. Some other conservative things that happened. Sandra Day O'Connor was appointed. Big deal, first woman on the Supreme Court as a conservative. Rick. Okay. Why I did that? Sorry, is because if you think about women's rise, you think about the liberal movement, right? She's a conservative. Okay. Now, yeah. Okay. Affirmative action. There were a couple cases at this time. Did I put them up? Did I put them up? That basically made it easier to argue reverse discrimination for whites. So taking a step back in affirmative action. Um, Abortion. So if you remember our Roe v. Wade, you better remember in the 70s, 73, um, that had kind of been the bedrock that of the abortion debate, and people thought that couldn't be touched. Well, it's starting to, the Supreme Court and the courts are coming out and having these other decisions that aren't going against Roe v. Wade, but making smaller changes. Here we go. Okay. Oh shoot. Um, so basically, these two are just like, the first one is saying that states don't have to give all their money, you know, to these abortion clinics, and the other one is making more specifics on abortion. And we've talked today; they're still doing that with the heartbeat bill. Um, this one, you have to wait 24 hours once you say you want an abortion to make sure it's not an emotional thing, and like having the husband or the consent of the father and all that kind of stuff. So that's a conservative step. Okay, next election, 1988. HW. Um, so Michael Dukakis, sorry, Black Monday was basically one of, I think, the largest drop of stocks in one day. The point I put this up there, though, is it happened right before the election, so it looks bad on the Republican Party, Reaganomics, but ultimately didn't hurt him because Bush kind of dominates. Yeah. I just want to talk a quick second about George H.W. Bush. He has like one of the best records for somebody going into the um, president's role. So I went to Yale. Like, his dad was a senator. Fun fact: decides to move back to Texas away from his New England family. Starts a big business, oil business, gets really rich. Okay, here's where I was going though. Um, is in the Navy, gets shot, his airplane gets shot down, gets saved, so that's pretty cool. Okay, let me think if I can remember all these roles he did. He was House Representatives, he was the Senate, he was the UN ambassador for America, he was emissary to China, the People's Republic of China, he was CIA director, and he was vice president, and then I mean, boy had a resume. I'm just impressed by that. Um, and yeah. Um, So kind of right when he gets elected, the Cold War really comes to an end. Um, uh, now this I don't know if okay, remind me to show you Tank Man tomorrow. Okay, so this is in China. Tiananmen Square. This is a super famous protest by young students in China against communism. If you can see in the background, there's a picture here of the goddess of democracy. Looks very similar to there we go, similar to Statue of Liberty. And all these kids out here are protesting for democracy. And finally, the Chinese government comes in here with tanks. Please tell me that picture. I don't. And shoots at their own people and kills them. Not all, kills like hundreds, and they all kind of have to scatter. So it's a sign of China kind of, yeah, democracy. We're not ready for you. However, the Soviet Union does thaw and does lose its power here. So the fall of Berlin Wall finally happens in 1989. I have the famous speech. Mr. Gorbachev, tear down that wall. Okay. Um, um, I'm looking at our time and I don't want to take up your whole time. Okay. I'll come back to that. Okay. Um, and the Berlin Wall falls. I mean, that is ridiculous how long that wall was up. Um, uh, sorry. Then you've got Hungary collapsing and Czechoslovakia collapsing and Ukraine collapsing. All these countries are slowly collapsing. The Communist Party is collapsing. Um, and eventually, it is no longer the USSR, it is the Commonwealth of Independent States. Basically, what that means is that all these now are independent, and Russia is kind of the strongest, the father figure here, but it does not have that hold on them. Now, when I taught world history, I delved into this a lot longer, but it wasn't like an easy, oh, okay, we're not communists, great. Because now there's a big argument, okay, well, now who is in power? Um, in Chechnya, if you can see that down here, they declared their independence in 1991. And I mean, that'd be like, you know, maybe a state in America declaring their independence. They've got a very distinct population there that thinks of themselves as independent. But Russia basically attacks and stomps that out and says, no, you can't be independent. Yugoslavia, there was a massive genocide. They called it ethnic cleansing. Think about that. And basically, the idea was cleansing ethnic groups that were not the majority. And so they were killing like Muslims and Croatians and pretty awful stuff. Okay. And the UN had to come in, and that's a whole big day I would teach. So here is the Berlin Wall. Can you imagine for a second putting yourself in that moment of just the symbolism behind this? Okay. So you've got um, the Cold War is over. Some would say that tensions are still high today. Now, one of the big questions is, well, now what do we like? Now, what's our foreign policy? What's the main thing we want to focus on? What it ultimately becomes is the Middle East, and that's still a big foreign policy concern today. So if you remember Iraq versus Iran, okay, who did we support? We support Iraq, and Saddam Hussein was Iraq. And if you think about Saddam Hussein, we did not have kind feelings in our heart for him. So what happens here is basically he's in this huge long war with Iran. They're in debt. How do we make money? Let's attack Kuwait. And Kuwait has oil, if you can see here. So Iraq basically goes in here, takes over Kuwait, and doesn't want to leave, and eventually wants to take over kind of the whole Persian Gulf. Um, so the UN says, well, that's not okay. um, that's against our United Nations policy, and they give basically first they decided to try an economic embargo, and he doesn't move. He stays there. Then he gives an ultimatum, and says, you need to be out of here by I think it's like January 15th, um, and we need unconditional surrender, and eventually they have to attack, and it's only 4 days. It's called Operation Desert Storm. It's a pretty dominant, quick attack. In Hussein ceasefire, and they do not kind of depose of him. He is still around to live another day, which ultimately is going to haunt us in the 2000s. So, unfortunately, that's going to be the next stage of America's foreign policy issues. Here's another picture for you. Okay. And just kind of wrapping up, President Bush, his kind of mantra was make America gentler and kinder, um, which is, I think about today and America being known as gentle and kind. And I'm not saying that would, I'm just saying we're not there, right? But, it's a funny thing to be able to say gentler and kinder. They could all buff now with the Cold War. He passes one of his main things that he's famous for is the Americans with Disabilities Act, saying that you can't have discrimination against people with mental or physical disabilities. Um, and then the Clarence Thomas hearings. So this is a big deal. Supreme Court. Thurgood Marshall was the first one. Um, and this is obviously a big deal. And then right before the hearings are over, Anita Hill comes out with an accusation of sexual harassment. Um, Very similar to the most recent Supreme Court appointee, right, with Kavanaugh. Eventually, they vote for him. He gets appointed. Um, but I think this is the last thing right here. Okay. Weird thing to end with, but in 1990, President Bush, before he gets elected, one of his big things that he's like famous for is "read my lips, no more new taxes," and that becomes the Republican mantra, right? No more new taxes. Um, well, he ends up having to raise taxes, not to tax, raise taxes. This becomes a huge issue in the Republican Party. We're going to talk about Newt Gingrich, if you've heard of him before. And it causes a lot of debate within the Republican Party, which is why you've got Clinton coming in. Anyway, there you go. That's a really huge chapter, and hopefully that helped. All right, see ya.